The battlefield was a wasteland of scorched earth and broken dreams, where the air shimmered with heat from burning wreckage and the metallic tang of blood hung heavy. Amidst the chaos, she lay sprawled on the ground, her once majestic form now battered and bruised. The alien queen, her elongated limbs twisted at unnatural angles, her luminous skin dimmed by streaks of grime and crimson fluid, looked nothing like the fearsome ruler who had struck terror into the hearts of countless enemies. Her breathing came in ragged gasps, each inhale a sharp reminder of the pain coursing through her body. Her silver eyes, usually ablaze with authority, flickered weakly as they scanned the desolate landscape around her. The war that had raged for days had finally taken its toll, leaving her abandoned by those who had sworn loyalty to her crown. One by one, her warriors had fallen or fled, their courage crumbling under the relentless assault of an enemy too powerful to withstand. Now, she was alone, vulnerable, and utterly defenseless. The silence after the battle felt deafening, broken only by the distant echoes of explosions still rippling across the horizon. She tried to move, but every muscle screamed in protest. Pain clawed at her insides, making it impossible to rise. Her regal posture, the very essence of her dominance, seemed stripped away, leaving behind only a fragile creature fighting against despair. And yet, even in this moment of utter defeat, there was something unyielding in her gaze, a spark of defiance that refused to be extinguished. It wasn't just survival instinct, it was pride, an unshakable belief that she was more than the sum of her wounds. But as the minutes dragged on and no rescue came, doubt began to creep in. Was this how it ended? Not in glory, not in triumph, but here, forgotten and left to die. She clenched her jaw, forcing herself to stay conscious despite the agony threatening to pull her under. If this was to be her end, then so be it, but she would face it with what remained of her dignity intact. Yet deep down, buried beneath layers of pain and exhaustion, a tiny voice whispered hope. Perhaps someone, or something, would defy the odds and find her before it was too late. In the haze of smoke and ash, he moved cautiously, his boots crunching softly against the debris-strewn ground. He was human, though calling him ordinary would have been a mistake. His weathered face bore the marks of countless battles, his hands calloused from wielding weapons far heavier than most could manage. Despite the destruction surrounding him, his steps were deliberate, purposeful, as if drawn by some unseen force. It wasn't long before he saw her. At first glance, she looked like little more than another casualty of the brutal conflict, a figure sprawled lifelessly among the ruins. But as he approached, his sharp eyes caught the faint rise and fall of her chest. Alive. Barely. And unlike anything he'd ever encountered before. Her otherworldly features were unmistakable. Sleek, iridescent skin marked with intricate patterns that shimmered faintly even in the dim light, elongated limbs that hinted at both grace and strength, and those piercing silver eyes, now clouded with pain but still radiating an aura of quiet power. For a moment, he hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to turn away, to leave this strange being to whatever fate awaited her. This wasn't his fight. She wasn't his kind. Helping her might mean risking everything. For what? A fleeting chance at redemption? Or perhaps something deeper, something he couldn't quite name yet? But then he noticed the way her fingers twitched slightly, as if reaching out for help she didn't dare ask for. Something inside him shifted. Maybe it was the soldier's code drilled into him over years of service. Never leave a comrade behind. Or maybe it was simpler than that, a gut feeling that told him walking away would haunt him forever. Kneeling beside her, he studied her wounds carefully. They were severe, jagged tears in her otherwise flawless skin, oozing a viscous blue liquid that glinted eerily in the fading sunlight. Whatever she was, she bled differently, lived differently, but the suffering etched across her face was universal. He reached out tentatively, his hand hovering above her shoulder, unsure whether his touch would bring comfort or harm. "You're not supposed to touch me," she rasped suddenly, startling him. Her voice was low and trembling, carrying an edge of authority even in its weakened state. "Human." He froze, his fingers inches from her arm. For a heartbeat, he considered pulling back, letting her words create distance between them. But instead, he met her gaze steadily, refusing to look away. There was fear in her eyes, yes, but also curiosity, a flicker of something akin to gratitude masked beneath layers of pride. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said finally, his tone firm yet gentle. You're wounded. Let me help. Her lips parted as if to argue, but no sound came out. Instead, she closed her eyes briefly, as though gathering strength or resolve. When she opened them again, the resistance in her expression had softened, replaced by a guarded acceptance. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was enough for him to act. With slow, deliberate movements, he began assessing her injuries, his hand steady despite the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. Whatever happened next, one thing was clear. Their paths had crossed for a reason, and neither of them could afford to ignore it. As he worked to stabilize her, she spoke haltingly, her voice strained but determined. "This war, it is not yours," she murmured, her words laced with both accusation and a strange vulnerability. "Why do you risk yourself for me?" Her silver eyes locked onto his, searching for answers she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. He paused, his hands hovering above her wound as he considered her question. "I don't know," he admitted quietly. "Maybe because I've seen enough death already. Maybe because you're still alive, and that means something." His voice hardened slightly, tinged with frustration. "Or maybe because everyone else has given up on you, and I can't stand seeing anyone left behind." Her expression flickered, a mixture of anger and disbelief flashing across her face. "You humans are foolish," she spat, though there was less venom in her tone than before. "You meddle where you are not needed. You think your kindness will change anything." "It's not kindness," he shot back, his own temper flaring. "It's survival. If we don't stick together, none of us make it out of this mess alive." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Besides, isn't that what leaders do? Fight for their people, even when things seem hopeless." Her breath hitched, and for a moment, she looked away, her gaze distant. The truth of his words stung, cutting deeper than any blade ever could. She had led her armies into battle, confident in their loyalty and her own invincibility. But now, abandoned and broken, she wondered if she had truly understood what leadership meant. Had she expected too much? Demanded too little? The weight of failure pressed heavily on her chest, mingling with the physical pain. "You know nothing of my people," she said finally, her voice softer but edged with bitterness. "They followed me because they feared me, not because they loved me. And now—" She trailed off, swallowing hard. "Now they have abandoned me." He frowned, studying her face intently. Fear can keep soldiers in line, sure. But it doesn't inspire them to fight, not the way love does. Maybe that's why they ran. Maybe they didn't believe in you anymore. Her jaw tightened, and she turned her head sharply, avoiding his gaze. The truth of his observation cut like a knife, but she couldn't deny it. She had ruled with an iron grip, demanding obedience without offering trust. And now, faced with the consequences of her choices, she felt the full weight of her isolation. "Then what would you have me do?" she asked bitterly. "Change who I am. Pretend to care for those who betrayed me." "No," he replied firmly. "But maybe it's time to figure out why they did. Maybe it's time to stop blaming them, and start asking yourself what went wrong." Her eyes widened slightly, startled by the raw honesty in his words. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the tension between them thick enough to suffocate. Then, slowly, she nodded, almost imperceptibly. Whether she agreed with him or simply lacked the energy to argue further, he couldn't tell. But one thing was certain. Their connection, fragile as it was, had shifted. Trust wasn't there yet, but understanding might be within reach. The journey ahead was fraught with peril, each step a test of endurance and resolve. As the human man hoisted the alien queen onto his shoulders, her weight both literal and metaphorical, the world around them seemed to conspire against their progress. The terrain was treacherous, littered with jagged rocks and hidden crevices that threatened to send them tumbling into oblivion. Above, the sky churned with ominous clouds, casting an eerie twilight over the land. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, soaking them to the bone and turning the ground into a slippery quagmire. She groaned softly, her voice barely audible over the patter of raindrops. "Leave me," she whispered, her pride warring with her growing weakness. "You cannot carry me forever." He gritted his teeth, adjusting his grip on her slender frame. "Not happening," he muttered, his determination unwavering. "We're getting out of this together." Every few steps, he paused to catch his breath, leaning against whatever makeshift support he could find, a crumbling wall, a fallen tree trunk. Each break was brief, just long enough to ensure she remained stable and that he didn't collapse under the strain. Her luminous skin, now dulled by dirt and injury, pulsed faintly with a bioluminescent glow, illuminating their path in the dim light. It was a small mercy, guiding them through the stormy darkness. Thunder rolled in the distance, a deep rumble that reverberated through the ground beneath their feet. Lightning split the sky, momentarily bathing the landscape in stark white light. In those flashes, he caught glimpses of movement, shadowy figures darting between the ruins, watching silently from afar. Were they friend or foe? He couldn't tell, and he didn't dare call out for fear of drawing unwanted attention. Instead, he pressed onward, his senses heightened, every nerve on edge. "Do you see them?" she asked weakly, her voice trembling as she too sensed the presence of others. "Are they coming for us?" "I don't know," he admitted, his voice tight with tension. "But we're not stopping until we find shelter." His mind raced, calculating distances and risks. Somewhere beyond the chaos, there had to be a safe haven, a place where they could regroup, tend to her wounds, and plan their next move. But finding it would require more than luck. It would demand resilience, resourcefulness, and sheer stubbornness. The rain intensified, turning into a torrential downpour that blurred vision and drowned sound. Water pooled in shallow depressions, creating miniature rivers that snaked across their path. With each labored step, the mud clung to his boots, dragging him down like invisible chains. She shivered against him, her body temperature fluctuating dangerously. He could feel the warmth of her blood seeping through the makeshift bandages he'd fashioned earlier, a grim reminder of how precarious her condition remained. Despite the physical toll, it was the emotional weight that gnawed at him most. Every stumble, every misstep felt like a betrayal, not just to her, but to himself. He had promised to get her to safety, to prove that humanity wasn't defined solely by its capacity for destruction. Failure wasn't an option, not when so much rested on his shoulders. "We'll make it," he murmured, partly to reassure her and partly to steel his own resolve. "Just hold on." She didn't respond, her breathing shallow and uneven. Whether she believed him or not, he couldn't say. All he knew was that they couldn't stop. Not now, not ever. Not until they reached the sanctuary they so desperately needed. As the storm raged on, the boundaries between their worlds began to blur, forged in the crucible of shared adversity. Though separated by species and circumstance, the bond between the human man and the alien queen grew stronger with each harrowing step. In quieter moments during their journey, when the immediate dangers receded and exhaustion allowed for reflection, they found themselves speaking, not just about survival, but about the lives that had shaped them. She spoke haltingly at first, her voice barely audible over the wind and rain. "My people, they called me the Unyielding." A bitter smile tugged at her lips. A title earned through conquest and fear. "I thought it made me strong, untouchable. But now—" Her words trailed off, her gaze distant as if reliving memories better left buried. "Now I wonder if it only made me blind." He listened intently, his stride slowing as he absorbed her confession. "Strength isn't always about power," he said finally, his tone thoughtful. "Sometimes it's about knowing when to let go, when to trust." Her eyes narrowed slightly, skepticism flickering across her features. "Trust is dangerous. It leaves you vulnerable. And yet here we are," he countered, glancing down at her briefly. "You trusted me enough to let me carry you, to patch up your wounds. Isn't that something?" She fell silent, contemplating his words. Perhaps trust wasn't such a foreign concept after all. After years of ruling through intimidation, of demanding loyalty without offering it in return, she had grown accustomed to solitude. But now, clinging to life in the arms of a stranger, she realized how hollow her reign had been. The titles, the victories, they meant nothing without connection, without meaning. For his part, the man found himself opening up in ways he hadn't anticipated. War had hardened him, teaching him to bury emotions beneath layers of practicality. Yet here, trudging through the muck and misery, he found himself sharing stories of home, of fields stretching endlessly under open skies, of laughter echoing around a campfire, of comrades who had become family. He spoke of loss, too, his voice cracking as he recounted battles where friends had fallen, leaving scars that never fully healed. "You fight for them," she observed softly, her tone tinged with awe. "Even though they're gone." "They're not gone," he corrected gently. "Not really. They live in the choices I make, the promises I keep. That's how you honor the dead, you carry their legacy forward." Her expression softened, a flicker of understanding crossing her face. For the first time, she saw him not as a mere human, but as a being driven by purpose, by love. It was a revelation that unsettled her, challenging everything she thought she knew about strength and leadership. Could it be that her empire, vast and formidable as it was, had been built on sand rather than stone? Their conversation ebbed and flowed, punctuated by moments of silence as they navigated treacherous terrain. Yet even in those quiet stretches, the connection between them deepened. They were two souls adrift in a sea of uncertainty, bound together not by obligation, but by choice. And in that choice lay a fragile hope, a belief that perhaps, against all odds, they could forge a new path, one that transcended the divisions of species and history. Somewhere along the journey, amidst the chaos and the storm, they ceased to be adversaries. They became allies, united not by shared goals, but by shared humanity, or whatever equivalent existed within her alien heart. It was an unspoken agreement, sealed not with words, but with actions. Each step forward was a testament to their resilience, each moment of vulnerability a bridge between worlds. The landscape shifted subtly as dawn broke, the horizon painted in hues of orange and pink that contrasted sharply with the devastation below. Ruins gave way to dense forests, their skeletal trees swaying ominously in the breeze. Somewhere ahead, a faint hum vibrated through the air, a sound neither mechanical nor natural, but something in between. It was a sign of life, albeit uncertain and foreboding. She stirred weakly against him, her voice barely audible. "That sound, it comes from my kind." His grip tightened reflexively, his pace quickening despite his fatigue. "Friend or foe?" "I don't know," she admitted, her tone heavy with apprehension. "But we must find out." The forest grew denser, the shadows lengthening as the sun climbed higher. The hum grew louder, accompanied now by faint whispers, voices overlapping in a language neither of them understood. He slowed his steps, scanning the trees for any sign of movement. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the foliage, its form humanoid yet distinctly alien. Its skin shimmered like hers, though marred by scars and burns. Behind it, others appeared, forming a loose circle around them. One of the newcomers stepped forward, addressing her in rapid, melodic tones. Her response was curt, commanding, though her voice trembled with exhaustion. Whatever she said caused a ripple of unease among the group, their glowing eyes narrowing suspiciously. "They want to know why you're helping me," she translated tersely. "They don't trust you." He straightened, meeting their stares head-on. "Tell them I saved your life. Tell them I'm not the enemy." Her hesitation was palpable, but she relayed his words nonetheless. The leader of the group exchanged a glance with his companions before responding, his tone skeptical but not outright hostile. She sighed, translating again. "They'll take us to their settlement, for now. But if you try anything—" "I won't," he interrupted firmly. "Let's just get moving." As they were led deeper into the forest, the atmosphere grew tense. The aliens kept their distance, their weapons trained on him while casting wary glances at her. Whispers circulated among them, their distrust evident. He could feel the weight of their scrutiny, their suspicion a tangible barrier between them. "They think you're using me," she murmured quietly. "That you have some ulterior motive." He shook his head, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "If I wanted to use you, I wouldn't have dragged you halfway across this godforsaken planet. I'd have left you to die." Her lips parted as if to argue, but she closed them again, her expression unreadable. For the first time, doubt flickered in her eyes, not about him, but about her own people. These survivors, hardened by war and loss, carried the same fear and mistrust she had once instilled in them. Seeing it reflected back at her was unsettling, forcing her to confront the consequences of her rule. When they reached the settlement, it was clear these aliens were remnants of a once great civilization. Crude shelters cobbled together from salvaged materials stood in stark contrast to the opulence she had known. Children peeked curiously from behind makeshift barriers, their wide eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. Elders huddled around fires, their weary faces lined with sorrow. The leader motioned for them to sit, his posture rigid as he addressed her directly. Their exchange was heated, voices rising as accusations flew. Finally, she turned to him, her expression grim. "They blame me for abandoning them, for failing as their queen." Before he could respond, the leader interjected, his tone sharp and accusatory. She translated reluctantly. "He says you're proof of my failure, that I've aligned myself with the very beings who destroyed us." His jaw tightened, anger simmering just below the surface. "Tell them I didn't destroy anyone. We're victims of the same war." Her translation was met with derisive laughter, the tension escalating. Weapons were raised, the standoff teetering on the brink of violence. Just as it seemed the situation would erupt, a frail elder stepped forward, her voice cutting through the hostility like a blade. Silence fell as she spoke, her words slow and deliberate. "She says we're running out of time," the queen translated, her voice barely above a whisper. "That whether we trust each other or not, we need to unite, or none of us will survive." The elder's gaze swept over the group, lingering on the human man and the alien queen. There was wisdom in her eyes, a quiet authority that demanded respect. Slowly, the weapons lowered, though the mistrust remained palpable. The message was clear: survival depended on cooperation, no matter how uneasy the alliance might be. As the day wore on, plans began to take shape. Maps were drawn in the dirt, strategies debated in hushed tones. Through it all, the human man and the alien queen remained at the center of the discussions, their presence both a source of contention and cautious optimism. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges neither side fully understood. But for the first time, there was a glimmer of possibility, a chance to rewrite the narrative of their fractured worlds. The makeshift council of survivors gathered around the fire, its flickering light casting long shadows across their weary faces. The air was thick with tension, each side eyeing the other warily as plans unfolded. The elder who had intervened earlier took charge, her frail hands tracing lines in the dirt map with deliberate precision. Her voice, though soft, carried an authority that commanded attention. "We cannot fight them alone," she said, her words translated by the alien queen. "Their weapons are too advanced, their numbers too great. But together—" She paused, glancing between the human man and the queen before continuing. "Together, we might stand a chance." Her statement hung in the air, heavy with implication. The queen shifted uncomfortably, her silver eyes darting to the humans scattered among the group. They were few, perhaps a dozen, but their presence was undeniable. Each bore the scars of battle, their expressions hardened by loss and survival. Yet there was something else in their gaze: determination. It mirrored her own conflicted emotions, a blend of fear and resolve that made her question everything she thought she knew about leadership. The human man leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees as he studied the crude map. "What's the plan?" he asked, his tone measured but firm. "How do we hit them where it hurts?" The elder hesitated, exchanging a glance with the queen. Finally, she spoke again, her words slow and deliberate. "There is a central hub, a fortress where they coordinate their attacks. If we can disable it, we disrupt their operations. But it will require splitting our forces. A diversion to draw their attention while a smaller team infiltrates the core." He nodded thoughtfully, his mind already racing through scenarios. "Sounds risky, but doable. Who leads the diversion?" Silence fell over the group, the weight of the decision pressing down on everyone. The queen straightened, her regal bearing returning despite her injuries. "I will lead it," she declared, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath the surface. "It is my duty." "No," the human man interjected sharply, drawing startled looks from both sides. "You're still recovering. Leading a frontal assault would be suicide." Her eyes narrowed, defiance sparking within them. And what would you suggest? That I sit idly by while others risk their lives for me? Yes, he shot back without hesitation. Because if you die, this entire effort falls apart. Your people need you, not just as a symbol, but as a leader. Someone who can unite them after this is over. The room grew quiet, the intensity of their exchange palpable. For a moment, it seemed as though she might argue further, but then she exhaled slowly, her shoulders sagging slightly. He was right, and she hated him for it. Hated how easily he saw through her bravado, how effortlessly he exposed the cracks in her armor. Yet, deep down, she knew his words rang true. Survival wasn't just about winning battles, it was about enduring beyond them. Fine, she conceded reluctantly, her voice barely audible. But you will not go alone. I will choose those who accompany you. He opened his mouth to protest, but one look at her resolute expression silenced him. This was her concession, her way of asserting control even in her weakened state. Reluctantly, he nodded. Agreed. As the meeting continued, roles were assigned and strategies refined. The Queen worked closely with the Elder, ensuring the diversionary force was well prepared and adequately armed. Though frustration simmered beneath her calm exterior, she channeled it into action, barking orders and inspecting equipment with meticulous care. Watching her, the human man couldn't help but admire her resilience. Even stripped of her crown and dignity, she remained a force to be reckoned with. Meanwhile, he focused on assembling his infiltration team. Drawing from both sides, he selected individuals whose skills complemented one another. Stealth experts, engineers capable of disabling complex systems, and warriors willing to lay down their lives for the mission. Trust remained fragile, but necessity forged bonds where none had existed before. Slowly, tentatively, the two groups began to function as one. Night fell, blanketing the settlement in darkness. Around the fires, conversations turned quieter, more personal. Stories were shared, tales of loved ones lost, homes destroyed, dreams shattered. Through these exchanges, barriers began to crumble. Humans and aliens alike found common ground in their shared grief, their mutual desire for vengeance tempered by hope for a better future. For the Queen, these moments were revelatory. She listened intently as her people recounted memories of peace, of festivals and celebrations that had once defined their culture. These stories painted a picture of a world far removed from the harsh reality they now inhabited, a world she had failed to protect. Guilt gnawed at her, but so did resolve. If they succeeded, if they managed to reclaim even a fraction of what they had lost, perhaps redemption was possible. The human man, too, found himself changed by the experience. As he sat beside the fire, listening to tales of alien traditions and values, he realized how little he truly understood about the universe beyond Earth. His perspective expanded, shaped not only by the horrors of war but also by the beauty of connection. These beings, so different from him in form and origin, were not so dissimilar in spirit. Their hopes, fears, and desires resonated deeply, bridging the gap between species. When dawn broke, the camp stirred with nervous energy. Weapons were checked, supplies distributed, and final instructions given. The Queen stood at the edge of the gathering, her luminous skin catching the first rays of sunlight. She looked every bit the ruler she claimed to be, yet there was a newfound humility in her stance, a recognition of her flaws and an acceptance of her role in shaping the future. The human man approached her, his expression unreadable. "Ready?" he asked simply. She met his gaze, her silver eyes reflecting the morning light. "As ready as I'll ever be." He nodded, extending a hand. After a brief pause, she took it, their grip firm and unyielding. In that moment, an unspoken promise passed between them. No matter what happened next, they would see this through, together. With a final nod to the assembled forces, the two groups set off in opposite directions. The diversionary team moved swiftly, their footsteps muffled by the dense underbrush. Behind them, the infiltration squad followed a separate path, their movements silent and precise. The stage was set, the pieces in motion. Whatever lay ahead, victory or defeat, they were united by purpose, and by the fragile bond that had formed amidst the ashes of war. Far away, hidden behind layers of fortified walls and shimmering energy shields, the enemy's fortress loomed like a dark monolith against the horizon. Its architecture was alien yet unmistakably hostile, jagged spires piercing the sky as if daring anyone to approach. Inside, the hum of machinery blended with the low murmur of voices, creating an oppressive atmosphere that seemed alive with malice. This was the heart of the adversary's power, the nexus from which their relentless campaigns were orchestrated. The human man crouched low in the underbrush, his infiltration team spread out around him like ghosts in the pre-dawn mist. Through the foliage, he could see the outer perimeter of the fortress, a labyrinth of patrols, automated turrets, and sensor arrays designed to detect even the slightest disturbance. Every detail had been accounted for, every contingency planned. Still, unease prickled at the edges of his mind. Something about the place felt wrong. Too quiet, too perfect, as if waiting. "They know we're coming," whispered one of the alien members of his team, her voice barely audible. Her glowing eyes darted nervously toward the towering structure. "This feels like a trap." "It probably is," he replied, his tone calm but edged with urgency. "But traps work both ways. We just have to make sure we spring it on our terms." His words did little to reassure her, or himself. The stakes were impossibly high. Failure meant not only their deaths but the annihilation of the Queen's people and likely humanity itself. Success, however, offered no guarantees either. Even if they managed to disable the central hub, the cost would be steep. Lives would be lost, sacrifices made. And yet, there was no turning back now. The diversionary force led by the Queen was already en route to draw the enemy's attention, buying them precious time. Time they couldn't afford to waste. He signaled for the team to advance, each member moving with practiced precision. The first obstacle came quickly, a series of motion sensors embedded in the ground, their faint red lights blinking rhythmically. One of the engineers, a wiry human with grease-streaked hands, knelt beside the nearest sensor, his fingers dancing over a portable device. Within moments, the blinking ceased, the sensors rendered inert. A collective sigh of relief rippled through the group, though it was short-lived. Ahead, the real challenge awaited. The outer wall of the fortress rose before them, its surface smooth and unyielding. No visible entry points marred its sleek design, save for a single access hatch located 20 feet above the ground. Scaling it undetected would require skill, patience, and a considerable amount of luck. Fortunately, they had all three, or so he hoped. "Rope anchors ready?" he asked quietly, turning to another member of the team, an alien with elongated limbs and prehensile digits perfectly suited for climbing. The creature nodded, producing a compact grappling hook attached to a thin but durable line. With a flick of its wrist, the hook soared upward, embedding itself securely in the lip of the hatch. A tug confirmed its stability. One by one, they ascended, their movements fluid and silent. At the top, the hatch proved to be locked, its mechanism sealed with biometric security. Another engineer stepped forward, this time an alien whose expertise lay in bypassing such systems. Tentacles tipped with delicate appendages unfurled from its torso, interfacing directly with the lock. Seconds ticked by agonizingly slowly until a soft click echoed in the stillness. The hatch slid open, revealing a narrow corridor bathed in dim blue light. Inside, the air was cold and sterile, carrying the faint metallic tang of technology. The walls pulsed faintly with embedded circuits, their glow casting eerie shadows across the floor. They moved cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the dense material beneath their boots. Every corner they rounded brought new dangers: drones patrolling the halls, surveillance cameras mounted discreetly in alcoves, and pressure-sensitive panels concealed beneath innocuous tiles. Each hazard required split-second decisions and flawless execution. Mistakes here meant discovery, and certain death. As they ventured deeper, the layout of the fortress became increasingly maze-like, corridors branching off in unpredictable patterns. Maps provided by the Elder had proven invaluable, but even they couldn't account for every twist and turn. Twice, they narrowly avoided detection by retreating into maintenance shafts, their bodies pressed tightly against the walls as patrols passed mere inches away. Tension coiled in their muscles, adrenaline keeping fatigue at bay. Then, suddenly, the hum of machinery grew louder, vibrating through the very bones of the structure. They had reached the central hub. The door leading into the chamber was massive, reinforced with layers of alloy and shielded by multiple security protocols. Breaking through would take time they didn't have. Somewhere outside, the diversionary force was engaging the enemy, drawing fire and sacrificing themselves to buy these precious minutes. Each second counted. "We need a distraction," the human man muttered, scanning the area for inspiration. His eyes landed on a nearby console, its interface glowing invitingly. An idea formed, risky but potentially effective. "I'll trigger an alarm," he announced, earning wide-eyed stares from his companions. "It'll draw guards away from the door, giving you enough time to breach it." "You'll be caught," one of the aliens protested, her voice tinged with alarm. "They'll kill you." "Not if I'm quick," he countered, already moving toward the console. "Trust me." Before anyone could argue further, he tapped a sequence into the panel, deliberately triggering a false alert. Alarms blared instantly, their shrill wail reverberating through the corridors. Footsteps thundered in response, guards rushing toward the source of the disturbance. Taking advantage of the chaos, the rest of the team sprang into action, working furiously to disable the reinforced door. He stayed behind, his pulse pounding in his ears as the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. Guards poured into the hallway, their weapons drawn and expressions grim. He raised his hands slowly, feigning surrender, his mind racing for a way out. But as the first guard reached for him, a deafening explosion rocked the fortress, sending shockwaves rippling through the walls. The diversion had begun. From miles away, the distant rumble of explosions echoed like rolling thunder, shaking the earth beneath their feet. The Queen stood at the forefront of her team, her posture rigid despite the lingering pain in her body. Before them stretched the enemy's outer defenses, a sprawling network of trenches, barricades, and artillery emplacements. It was a formidable sight, one that would have intimidated even the most seasoned warrior. Yet she felt no fear, only a cold, steely resolve. "They'll respond soon," she said, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "Hold your positions until my signal." Around her, her people nodded grimly, their weapons trained on the horizon. Some were veterans of countless battles, their faces hardened by years of conflict. Others were younger, their eyes wide with apprehension but burning with determination. Together, they formed a patchwork army united by desperation and hope. She glanced at them briefly, pride swelling in her chest despite the circumstances. These were her people, not subjects bound by fear, but allies fighting for a shared cause. For the first time in years, she felt truly connected to them. The human man's infiltration team relied on her success. Without the diversion to draw attention, their mission would fail, and with it, any chance of victory. She couldn't let that happen, not when so much depended on her leadership. Squaring her shoulders, she raised her hand, signaling the start of the assault. The first wave of attacks came swiftly, a barrage of projectiles raining down on the enemy's fortifications. Explosions erupted in fiery bursts, sending plumes of smoke spiraling into the sky. The defenders responded almost immediately, their counterattacks fierce and unrelenting. Artillery shells screamed overhead, impacting with devastating force. The air filled with the cacophony of battle, shouts, screams, and the relentless roar of weapons firing in unison. Through it all, the Queen remained steadfast, directing her forces with precision and clarity. "Flank them," she commanded, pointing toward a weak point in the enemy's line. "Push forward, don't let them regroup." Her orders were obeyed without hesitation, her authority unquestioned. Warriors surged ahead, exploiting gaps in the enemy's defenses while others provided covering fire. The tide of battle shifted momentarily in their favor, bolstering morale. But the enemy was relentless, their reinforcements pouring in steadily. Wave after wave crashed against the Queen's forces, testing their resolve. Amidst the chaos, she found herself locked in combat with a towering adversary, a hulking figure clad in blackened armor, its visor gleaming with malevolent intent. Its weapon, a jagged blade crackling with energy, swung toward her with lethal speed. She dodged instinctively, her movements fluid despite her injuries. Her own weapon, a slender staff imbued with ancient technology, hummed to life, its tip glowing with a soft, ethereal light. Their clash was brutal and unrelenting, blows exchanged with ferocious intensity. Sparks flew as metal met energy, the air crackling with raw power. She fought with everything she had, channeling her anger, her pain, her guilt into each strike. This was her penance, her chance to prove that she was more than the failures of her past, more than the fear she had instilled in her people. But the enemy was strong, its strength augmented by technology far beyond anything she had encountered. Blow after blow forced her back, her stamina waning with each passing second. Desperation crept into her thoughts, threatening to overwhelm her. Just as she prepared for what might be her final stand, a familiar voice cut through the din. "Your Majesty!" She turned, incredulous, to see a small contingent of her warriors breaking through the enemy's flank. Among them was the elder who had spoken so wisely during the council. Despite her frailty, the old woman wielded a staff of her own, its radiant glow illuminating the battlefield. "We swore to follow you," the elder declared, her voice strong and unwavering. "To fight for you, not out of fear, but out of loyalty." Tears welled in the queen's eyes, blurring her vision. Loyalty. It was a word she had never truly understood until now. Until this moment, when her people chose to stand beside her, not because they were compelled, but because they believed in her. Believed in the possibility of a future worth fighting for. With renewed vigor, she rejoined the fray, her strikes sharper, her movements faster. Together, she and her warriors pushed forward, carving a path through the enemy's ranks. The tide of battle shifted once more, momentum swinging in their favor. Victory was still uncertain, but for the first time, it felt within reach. In the fortress, the human man fought for his life, his every move calculated to buy his team the time they needed. The outcome of the war rested on their shoulders, and on the courage of those fighting alongside them. The human man narrowly escaped capture, his quick thinking and sheer determination keeping him one step ahead of the enemy. Back at the central hub, the infiltration team succeeded in disabling the fortress's core systems, plunging the structure into chaos. The Queen's diversionary force, battered but unbroken, held their ground long enough for the mission to succeed. As the fortress crumbled and the enemy's forces faltered, the Queen and the human man reunited on the battlefield, their bond stronger than ever. Though battered and scarred, they stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next, together. Their fight was far from over, but for the first time, hope burned brighter than fear.